Welcome, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Steelers Draft Talk. I'm your host, Derek Bell. With me is my good buddy, Nick Martin. It is NFL Combine week, sort of, next week. But this is going to be our preview show for the Combine. Going to talk about some guys that we're really excited to see test, work out, as long as some guys that, we need to get some answers from. So, Nick, first off, how we doing, brother?
Doing great, man. Doing great. We're getting closer to the most exciting part of the draft process where everyone watches guys run around in shorts and whether or not a guy runs a 4.3 and how that might affect their stock, as we've seen in the past. No Al Davis anymore, rest in peace. But if he were around, he would love this class. He would take some guys a little higher than expected.
Yeah, facts. A lot of speedsters in this class. I think the 40-yard dash, man, has almost become like this national spectacle. Like it's so funny how excited draft Twitter gets over the 40-yard dash. I love it. I'm excited to see it. I think it's going to be interesting to see these guys run. There's a lot of, like you said, a lot of fast dudes on this lineup of combine invites. I do want to preface that by saying, we talk about this all the time on Twitter, but with the combine, it's good to check boxes. But the most important thing really of the combine is going to be the players interviewing with the teams and then the medical history aspect of it. The testing is a portion of the, evaluation, but it's, important to not lose sight that it's not everything. And I think that's sometimes what people kind of fall victim to is, counting things twice. So if a guy's extremely fast, don't bump him up your rankings or just, absolutely fall in love with him a second time when you already knew he was fast. Those things should be expected. Now,
if a guy
for me,
a little
for me, it's like if anyone runs, if I'm thinking, some dude's got, 4.3 speed, 4.4 speed, and they go out there and run like a 4.55 or 4.640, then you got to go back and, to the tape and see kind of what happened, what went wrong, where you were wrong. But, it's something to keep in mind for sure during draft season.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Because a lot of times, it's not always, it's confirming somewhat of what but also if there's something unexpected you see, it makes you go back to the tape to see, okay, where did I go wrong with watching this player? Because we're all human. We don't always see it, right? And some of these guys don't always play how they test, and it's important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, for sure. All right, without further ado, let's get started with some guys that we think are going to just blow up the combine. We mentioned that there's a lot of great athletes here. Run me down a list of players that you're looking forward to seeing, kind of exploded in Indy next week.
DJ Turner from Michigan. He has a huge chance to match the combine record of of the 3-cone set by Oklahoma's Jordan Thomas of a 6.28. He clocked a 6.29 in the offseason, and he has been clocked also at running 23.07 miles per hour on the GPS. Yeah, that's absolutely just ridiculously moving. And, he's gone from 177 pounds to 187. He's a ridiculous athlete. Guy, definitely expecting to blow up the combine. Another guy, Will McDonald the fourth.
That's my guy.
Dude, he is ridiculously just twitched, athletic. He moves so well on film. He can explode off the line when he's not false stepping, and you can see it because Matt Campbell, coach of Iowa State, he expects him to jump 42 or 43 inches at the combine and broad jump around 11 feet. And I could definitely see him touching near those numbers because you see that level of athleticism. I'm also very curious to see overall how he looks in the agilities because he's a guy who he can absolutely bend. And while the agility numbers don't always match with the bend, it's important to keep it in mind as a number, because that change of direction is important, especially when playing in space.
Sure.
Now here's another guy. I love this guy, Rashawn Johnson, Texas's backup running back to Bijan Robinson. 6 foot, 228 or so, 225 or so. He has been clocked running around 22.6 miles per hour in the GPS, which makes him one of Texas's fastest players. And while that speed doesn't always show up on film, I think it's more of a build-up speed. But when he hits that gear, you can tell that he can outrun pursuit angles way more than you'd expect a guy that big to be able to. Definitely and I think he moves pretty well as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does well in the agilities as well. For me, I really like him, and I'm excited to see him. Now, this is interesting because I've talked about him on the podcast a few times. Joe Tippmann, center from Wisconsin. This is a guy who is 6'6", 323 pounds. He is an absolute mammoth of a human being, but he moves really well. They ask him to pull a ton. He looks smooth, but he's not always, he's taller, so it doesn't always show up on the film. But he's going to put on a spectacle. He's been clocked having a 4.31 pro agility time and like a 1.65 10-yard split, which is absolutely absurd for a guy that big and strong. And that's definitely a guy that I'm really excited to see. I'm a pretty big fan overall of this game.
Yeah.
And going back to another guy I love, Adi Tamiwa Adebare. I think he is a guy that really cemented what he could do at the Senior Bowl, because on film, he was not always playing the role that I thought was best suited for him, which was as an attacking 3 technique with an occasion, the ability to play as a 5 and hold the point of attack with his length. But he's not just 6'1", 280. Like, he is going to bend and he's going to show off in the agilities. He's been timed with like a 405 shuttle drill in testing before, a 6.93 cone, and like a 10.5 broad jump and a 37.5-inch vertical jump. And
Freaky.
yes, it's absolutely insane, like some of the stuff he can do. And while those guys, I'm just gonna kind of talk about this real quick. While we're talking about some of the reported testing numbers, some of these are not going to match stride for stride. Some of these might get better, some of these might get worse. And it's important to keep in mind that these guys are going to be going through a ton of trails. They're going to be exhausted by the end of the process, especially with all the interviews. So it's important to keep in mind not only how they test, but also keeping in mind, the context of the combine, what they're going through. And now I'm going to get back to the list and go to another guy, Trenton Simpson. 6'3", 240 pounds. I wouldn't be shocked if he had a type of performance that we saw maybe from like a Ryan Shazier back in the day in terms of what he did at his pro day. He's been, Tigers coaches say he runs a 40 in the high 4.3s, which I could definitely see it. I think he's more 4.4. He's a guy who moves incredibly well, but I just have no clue what the hell to do with him because he just plays so many roles and he doesn't really know what he's doing or what he's looking at. So, it doesn't really change much for me how he's going to end up moving. Another guy, Darius Rush from South Carolina. He was the fastest player at Senior Bowl practices, clocking in at 21.65 miles per hour, which is really fast for a corner. It would probably translate to around low 4.4s, maybe mid 4.4s or so, maybe even a little. Maybe I might be underestimating it just a little bit, but Rush is a guy that showed a lot of recovery speed, and that was the big thing. Like when he got caught out of phase, he was able to get back into the picture, and you love seeing that in corners that are as big and tall as he is. I don't necessarily know if the change of direction is elite, but he was mirroring routes extremely well, so I'm kind of curious to see how he does there. One more, two more guys I got to name. Ivan Pace Jr., another Senior Bowl guy, clocked in at 20.58 miles per hour, which is blazing. For perspective, Troy Anderson last year he was at 20.29 miles per hour, and he ended up having like a 4.42 40-yard dash. Ivan Pace has a chance to put up like Devin Bush type of numbers, in my opinion. Like he's a guy who can really move and he can see. And he knows how to take on blocks kind of well, but the problem is deconstructing and being able to use his hands to get off those blocks consistently. You know, that's the big thing I wanted to see with him more than anything. But Pace is a ridiculous athlete. He's a guy that he's kind of divisive right now because of his size, but he's gonna run out of the gym. And you look at what has been a weaker linebacker class. I wouldn't be surprised to see him rise up after a combine performance that puts him under the microscope of most people. And then my last guy, Drew Sanders from Arkansas. We've gone over both of us have gone over the film. He can't tackle worth the damn. Like he has so many missed tackles, but he is a ridiculous athlete. It's apparent from the jump. Like the guy can absolutely move so well in space. I honestly think he can bend way better around the edge than you expect a guy like that to be able to. But I just love the way he's able to sift around blocks. Like he's just really fluid. He can deconstruct, but he also has that range in terms of his speed. I wouldn't be surprised if he ran around low 4.6s, high 4.5s. I think he'll test pretty well overall in the agilities as well. It's that's a guy I definitely expect to make some waves.
Yeah, with Sanders, like you said, the missed tackles are mind-boggling on film, but you look at a guy that can really move sideline to sideline. He's a good athlete. I'm actually curious on what his length ends up being because I know he's listed like 6'5", I think 233. He looks all of 6'5". I mean, he has
Yeah.
that like I think he's probably smaller, but he's definitely smaller in terms of his build. He's leaner, but he almost looks like how Leighton Vander Esch looked coming out of college, how they just tall, long. I'm
Yeah.
curious on what his wingspan is. He doesn't always use it like correctly. I think his block shedding's a little bit maybe inconsistent. But he can definitely do it. And I think as he gets stronger, that was the main thing. Like when I was watching him, like if he can get a little bit stronger, like because he has room to grow and room to add weight, he gets a little bit stronger, and he's gonna be a really good prospect. Um, I'll just kind of quickly run down my list. We had some of the same players. We can kind of talk about them in the middle, but number one on my list, this is a guy who I didn't really know much about until I was covering the Shrine Bowl virtually, and that was Starling Thomas from UAB. Just a cornerback who can absolutely fly. I know that Feldman's Freak List guy, they had him at 24 miles per hour on the GPS. I don't know what that equates to in the 40. I am assuming that it's definitely in the 4.3s range. Thomas is a guy that like I always like doing this on Combine Week. I always try to put out a list on Twitter, and it's like, all right, give me your guy that you think runs the fastest 40. And, there's going to be a lot of popular answers, but I think I'm going to go with Thomas just because I think that he's kind of a dark horse, and I legitimately think that he could run the fastest 40 at the event this year. I know in high school he was a state champion track guy as well. He ran like a 10.4, I think, 100 meter maybe
Yeah.
in high school, which is like unbelievably fast. So I'm excited to see him run. I think he's going to do extremely well. And then Christian Gonzalez, I want to see what he weighs in at because I do think he's close to 200. But, solid length. I think if he runs the 40, he's going to run it like high 4.3s, low 4.4s, in my opinion. I think he's super explosive. He's going to kill it in the vertical, the broad jump. I think he's stronger than his play dictates too. He doesn't always play to his strength and kind of imposes physicality. I think he's a little bit more of a finesse corner right now, but I do think he's a strong kid who doesn't get like bumped off routes. He could play at the catch point. He tackles pretty well in space. I'm just super excited to see him run because I watched every game that Oregon played this past year just of him on film, and I didn't see any receiver stack him at all that season. Like I think there was like maybe one or two times where a receiver got a step on him. So intrigued to see how he runs. Gonzalez is going to be a first round pick for sure. It's just a matter of, he goes out there and runs like a 4.35 40, and he's probably a lock to go in the top 10. So, another guy, Strombo, Trey Dean from Florida. I was excited about him heading into the week just because he's a guy that's he was a fairly high recruit coming out of high school. He's a guy who has some cornerback experience. That's, I think, where he came to Florida as. But really good mover. Has played, has experience playing in the slot, played in the box, a little bit deep safety. There was that video going around Twitter a couple days ago of him doing like 26 reps of 225 with wherever he's training at, that's unbelievable for a safety. I mean, we're talking about, borderline. I believe that's like record type numbers for a DB. So he's going to kill it. I mean, there's a lot of people that are probably going to end up boosting him up their rankings just because, of how he looks. And I thought he had a good Strombo week. So this is the guy that I think I'm most excited to see run, mainly because I wanted to confirm my priors. But Zay Flowers from Boston College. I've been a Zay Flowers fan for a long time, several years. I love watching him play. But I think what kind of sets him apart from the rest of these slot receivers in this class, and it's a good slot receiver class, is I just think he has a different gear than everybody else. Even, the Josh Downs, some of these other guys that, can really play. I just think he has a different gear. I think, you sent me that tweet from Tony Pauline saying that he's like aiming for low 4.3s. I had him down in my notes as I thought he was going to run somewhere between like a 4.35 and a 4.38. Just that was the kind of speed that I thought he had. With Flowers, I think the biggest difference between him and some of these other guys is how quickly he gets to that speed. Has a real big time accelerator. It seems like he can go from 0 to 100 in like, a split second. So
reportedly been running some insanely fast 10-yard splits too. So, and
I
mean, how I feel about 10-yard splits.
Yeah, it definitely checks out. I mean, 10-yard splits, incredibly important, not just for receivers, but, edge rushers, because that's, that 10-yard span is where they're going to be doing 90% of their work, especially as a pass rusher. So I'm interested to see what he runs. Flower and again, Flowers, I think, he came in at the Shrine Bowl, I think at 182, which I thought was an incredible weight for him.
Yes.
5'10", 182 puts him like firmly in the realm of he can still play outside if you don't have a guy out there already. Like, I think most teams are probably going to immediately day one might put him in the slot, but I think, he's got the weight and the skill set to play outside. So he's already checked off a couple boxes for me. I'm just curious on him confirming my priors at the 40. Just some other guys that, I'm very interested to see. I don't know. Quarterbacks are kind of weird when it comes to combine. Some of them test, some of them don't. It's hard to figure out what's going to happen with that. Anthony Richardson, I mean, that's like a no-brainer. I mean, he could literally break Twitter, I think, if he ends up running the 40. Like, maybe not because, like, we're used to – I think Lamar Jackson, like, that hype, even though he didn't actually run the 40, I think Lamar's speed has, like, discombobulated everyone else's thoughts when it comes to quarterback speed. But I think Richardson's got legitimate 4.4 speed. And he's doing that at 240 pounds or whatever he's listed at Florida. I think he's like a legit 6'4", 240, can run in the 4.4s. I think if he throws, I'm very interested to see. I think that people will be impressed with the way he throws on air. And especially how well he throws the deep ball. That was the number one thing that I came away impressed with, aside from like the pocket navigation stuff, is I thought he threw the deep ball pretty well, pretty accurately. And then just another guy, you talk about guys that could potentially maybe break the 40-yard dash record. Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee. That's kind of a no-brainer, easy one, but Hyatt is an incredibly smooth mover who, can get to that top gear very quickly. I would be absolutely floored if Hyatt ran like higher than like a 4.35. I mean, I'm expecting like 4.31, 4.32, just baseline for him, honestly. So,
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
You're good. You're good.
Oh, okay. So you were mentioning some guys you thought could break the record, and that's where I'm actually really interested to watch some of these scat backs. And I kind of want to get into this as a subtopic, but Devin Akane, who is absolutely ridiculously fast. Like, he's probably the fastest player I think I've seen on film in terms of just being able to get to top gear in such a hurry. ridiculous, like just athlete in terms of his like track credentials. Just he's run a 10-1-4 in the 100-yard dash, which is like the 10th fastest time in A&M history. I'm so curious to see how he does. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, who's reportedly ran a 4.32 when he was transferring from Georgia Tech to Alabama, which could be faster. And he's been clocked at like 22.4 miles per hour in game speed. And then you got Tajay Spears, who another guy you think I think he should test well. I actually think he's going to have the overall best testing in terms of like agility and like 40 speed and 10-yard
Yeah.
splits. I think he has a real chance to do that. Deuce Vaughn's another guy I'm really curious, smaller guy. You really want to see how some of these quote scat backs, how they end up testing overall. But I think it's just going to make for such a fun event, just watching to see how they outdo one
Yeah.
another.
Yeah, I think Spears and Gibbs to me are, more complete than those
Yes.
other two guys you mentioned. But I even think HN's a different type of back for me as well because of how well he can make guys miss. Like it's not just straight line speed with him. A lot of these like scat backs that we see that can run incredibly fast in a straight line, they maybe don't have as much like functional athleticism or like agility to go with that. And his change of direction is unbelievable. And I actually think like he's stronger than like your
He's
average kind of scat back.
he's listed at 185, but I'm not so sure that's like correct is how I feel, because
Yeah.
like he's more rocked up in like the hips and like in the legs than you'd expect a guy like that. So I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up surprising me with like how
Yeah.
he ends up measuring in, and I think that could really bolster his stock if that ends
Yeah,
up
he goes in
happening.
there and weighs in at like, 190 and then runs in the 4.3s. I mean, we're going to be having a different type of conversation about, where he's potentially going to land. And I mean, I I normally, I'm anti running back in round one, and I definitely don't anticipate, him to go in that range. But you
Yeah.
talk about taking even like gadget guys or scat backs, even in like round two, I feel like is, a little bit of a risky proposition because you can find those guys later in the draft usually, but like a team like Kansas City to replace like Jerick McKinnon with Devin Achane, like I think that would be, I'm all on board with that because I think that's a team that could potentially, get the most out of him. I did want to holler at two more players I thought was going to test well. I was at the bottom of my list, but I think I'm missing people. So
Mm.
um, I'm really interested to see how Zach Harrison tests. Like I think he's going to test extremely well. Ohio State edge rushers. Ohio State always has their guys really prepared for like these types of events. Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, of course Alabama, like these big schools, Georgia, like these big schools always seem to have their guys really well prepared. But he's incredibly explosive to me, and I think that he's going to absolutely kill. Like the broad jump, I think he's extremely long too. I'm interested to see where like he measures in at. This kind of leads us into our next segment. But I'm curious on how he does in like the three cone and how well he moves because I see him a little bit as like a linear athlete, and I want to see just a little more consistency in terms of like bend and like flexibility. But who are some guys that you're looking forward to, like, or what are some questions that you need answers on, other guys?
I think we both have the same exact question, and it
Yeah.
involves probably the freakiest athlete of among them all is Keely Ringo,
Hmm.
who is 6'2", 215, and
Safety
legit,
build.
yeah, legitimate 4.3 guy, can clock at 22 miles per hour on the GPS, like absolutely can run. I've had so many questions about his transitions because of how constant he got beat across his face and just how slow some of his hip transitions were in terms of being able to turn. So I'm going to be looking how he does in the field drills more than anything. I want to see
Mhm.
how fast and twitchy he can turn his hips. Those are the big things I want to see with him. Change of direction as well, the shuttle, you know, those are the big things I want to see with Keely Ringo. Those are more important to me overall because you can run fast and there are things you can do with a corner with like him, but the appeal of him, especially early on, people thought he was way more scheme versatile, maybe he might not have as much as that versatility as people think because of some of the limitations in his hips. So I'm very curious to
Yep.
see, would you say you have the same overall thought? I know you have the same overall thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was extremely high on Ringo coming into the season. I thought we were going to get like a big jump, but just some things like repeatedly coming up on film, like the transitions, the footwork, the overall technique is inconsistent. But like you said, like the scheme versatility might not be there early on. I think if you draft this kid and you throw him into a man coverage scheme where he has to line up across receivers, some of these shiftier guys, like he's going to struggle, particularly early on until like he really hones in on his technique and fixes or, smoothens out some of those transitions. Another guy that I'm really interested to see how they do in the field, Joes, is Joey Porter Jr. I have some of the same questions, maybe not as exaggerated. They're definitely different styles of corners, mainly because Ringo doesn't use his physicality nearly as well or as much as Porter Jr. does, particularly at the line of scrimmage. Yeah. I'm interested to see, like, because I legitimately don't know, like, can Joey Porter Jr. play like off man coverage? I don't know because I don't know that I saw it. And that's why I'm interested to see like how he does out of a back pedal, how he flips his hips. I don't think he's necessarily stiff. I just don't know that he's as fluid as like maybe you would want for a guy where he's going to go. And I also think like the 40 is sort of important for him because like I mentioned this on the podcast a couple weeks ago when I was talking with Noah, but I think that Porter Jr. is more raw in his technique than people are giving him credit for because of how successful he was in college. I just know that there's some perplexing things that I see on tape in terms of him lunging, some false steps, locking out his hips, two-hand jams.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff at the line of scrimmage works better against college receivers who are going to give up their chest and don't have as much of a detailed release plan. That's not really going to work at the next level. So I'm curious on like, is, not only, where he goes to further develop his technique is really important, but is he going to be as versatile where you can play him in off coverage? I'm not really worried about him in zone. I think he can do that. He's a smart dude. And I think his zone reps are fine from what I saw on tape, but how he does in the drills, in terms of like measurements,
the arm length, it's going to be crazy.
Yeah. The measurements for Porter Jr. are going to be like unbelievable. And that's why I think like if he runs like sub 4.5, he's a lock for the first round. I think like, I mean, I feel like I'm a little bit lower on him than the consensus, but at the same time, like I think he's a first round player if, he proves he can run, sub 4.4. Let's get to some weigh-ins. What weigh-in guys are you curious about?
Before I do that, I want to add one quick thing. So Joey Porter Jr. has been training with Oliver Davis second. He's been training Eli Ricks and Emmanuel Forbes. And he's talked a lot about how big and fast, athletic and quick like Joey Porter Jr. is. Apparently Joey, I don't know if this is a confirmed source. I've just read it somewhere. I'm going to mention it. I'm not going to talk about the validity of it. He's apparently aiming for 4.3s, and I think like I would have to go crazy and go back to the tape at that point because I don't know if I'm seeing something like that from Joey Porter Jr. But hey, I've been surprised before. We'll see what happens there in that regard.
I have like mid 4.45 as like 4.45 was the like, okay, he just killed it. He's definitely going round one type thing. For me, that was the absolute fastest. I don't think he runs slower than like a 4.52, but he is somebody. It was hard for me to gauge his deep speed. Honestly,
no, I agree on that completely. So guys, I'm really curious to see how they weigh in. So I'm going to talk about another guy, that we just mentioned, Oliver Davis, who he's training, Emmanuel Forbes, reportedly had played the season around in like the 160s, if I remember correctly, like 160, like high 160s, low 170s. I'm very curious to see how he measures in because I think he's got good tape. I think he has really good ball skills. I think there are some gambles he takes on film, but I do think he's a guy overall in terms of athleticism, in terms of straight line speed and the hips. It all aligns. I'm just very curious to see how that weight ends up measuring up because if you're a much skinnier corner like that, like there's going to be concerns with your functional strength at the line of scrimmage in particular, and being able to play catch technique consistently for sure.
Yep.
And I'm gonna kind of run through a few guys because there's quite a few. Lucas Van Ness. This is probably the biggest one for me because I think Lucas Van Ness, if he goes to an interior defensive line position, he has a chance to be a Justin Smith type of player. And I don't say that in light regards. I think there's a rare level of power. There's a lot of contact balance to be able to hold up at the point of attack. The problem, he's a tweener size right now. He's like in the 270s. I think he's a guy, if he goes, he shows up like at least 10 pounds heavier and he shows he's committed to that. I think that change, that's where I'm much higher on him overall. If he shows up as a more of a 260 guy, that's concerning to me overall because he might be thinking he's going to be on the edge more often. And I don't think he's the type of guy that's going to unlock his full potential along the edge. I do think there is a good floor, but that's it. A bit about it. Okay, I'm gonna listen to you.
I cannot stress how much I agree with you. I don't know that he's gonna be able to put on enough weight to like transition to that hand in the dirt type of guy. I do think that he'll probably come in around like high 260s. That's what he looked like to me on film. But you mentioned just his potential as an edge rusher. The potential is there. I mean, the kid's obviously extremely athletic, but when you watch his film, I watched 2 games before I put out like my first round mock like last month or whatever. Or I guess it was a couple weeks ago. I don't know. But I watched 2 games of him. I don't know that I saw him do anything other than try to run straight down the middle of a tackle. And like, again, he had incredible success with it. I know he's got highlights of, running over like Peter Skoronski and running over Paris Johnson. That's all good and fine. But like at the next level, offensive tackles are not just going to let you
They're not going to
do the bull in a china shop, run straight down their face, 30 pass snaps a game. Now, are you like, can he win like that? Yeah, absolutely. But he's going to have to add some type of a change up, like whether it's, better manipulation with his head, like head fakes or some stutters, some crossovers, some things like that, or just add like a legitimate secondary move. Like right now, he's literally just a single dimensional player to me, who's going to get drafted higher than probably we're willing to admit right here or that we're comfortable with. But I agree. I think more of a like hand in the dirt type of player, like true defensive end type, would probably be a better career switch for him long term, just because that strength is unbelievable.
Yeah. In my opinion, I think he can be what people wanted Taven Bryan to be. That's how I feel if he goes along the interior, because I think he has that functional strength. Mm-hmm. I think he just needs to add more to it overall, and I think there's a role for him in that regard. I just want to mention a few more things because I'm running out of time. But Jordan Addison, I just want to see what he measures in at. My opinion, I like him more than Calvin Ridley. I like him less than Devontae Smith. I'm very curious to see if he measures more like a Devontae Smith, measures more like a Calvin Ridley, or if he's somewhere in between, like 170, 180. Where is he going to measure in between that? Maybe he surprised me and measures in at like 183, like Zay Flowers did. We'll see. Few more guys. Tyreek Stevenson, I want to see his transitions. He has the clunkiest transitions I've seen out of a corner, but he has such good technique that it bugs me to no end how he doesn't get beat across his face. And he shows really good makeup speed. So I'm really curious to see how the change of direction, the agilities end up matching up, but also the field drills. And Clark Phillips, I just want to see, does he measure in at like 5'9", 5'10", maybe 5'11"? Is the athleticism more like an Asante Samuel Jr., like I thought I saw on film, or is he maybe a way better athlete than expected? And that might raise the projection of where he might go overall. Clark Phillips is great tape. I have no questions about that. And yeah. I do think he's a very functional athlete for what he offers. In terms of functional athletes, Jack Campbell has good film at linebacker. He has good block deconstruction. He has good eyes. He's able to see things. I think he moves decently well. I think he's got very good functional athleticism. The problem, I don't think he's very twitchy. He's
Mhm.
smooth, but he's not twitchy, so he has to go through blocks, not around them. He doesn't, have that level of upside as an edge, as a potential blitzer. Campbell, I'm just kind of curious to see how the 10-yard splits are and like his 40. How fast is he overall? What's the change of direction in terms of just like how he measures up? I think he'll be good. I think like he can do like Nick Kwiatkowski numbers, but if he goes a little bit lower than that, that could raise a little bit more of my expectations and make me want to go back to the film.
Yeah. You hit on a bunch of stuff that I had written down too. I mean, just weigh-ins for Forbes and Phillips are going to be huge. I mean, how,
Yeah,
how those guys test at their weights. I think Forbes is definitely lighter than Phillips. I think Phillips might weigh in a little bit heavier than we kind of expect, but he's still going to be in that like mid 180s range if I had to guess. Forbes is a guy that I worry about coming in like sub 180. I think he looks lean,
yeah,
but
he's very.
like you mentioned some of his ball skills though. Like I believe he's the NCAA record holder for pick sixes. I mean, he had like I know that he has the record for the SEC, but I'm pretty sure that someone tweeted me that and corrected me because I think I tweeted it out saying that he was SEC record holder, but somebody I think corrected me saying he was NCAA holder. So I'll have to fact check that. But just a couple guys like 40-yard dash wise that I'm curious on seeing what they run that could potentially tick them up a bit for me. Devon Witherspoon, I'm not worried about the 40-yard dash. I have him personally pegged for like a 4 or 5 guy who's a lot more explosive in short bursts than anything else. I will not worry if he runs a 4.5. I think Twitter may freak out a little bit, but I am not worried about if he runs a 4.5. I am going to be concerned if he comes in like 4.55, which I don't think is the case, but I don't think that his deep speed is a strength for him. I don't see the recovery ability. I don't think he's a crazy athlete in terms of like a deep speed type of guy. But change of direction, short area burst, explosiveness, all that he checks the boxes on everything else. So
Yeah,
I'm just curious on what he runs. If we're talking about a guy like he goes out there and runs like a 4.45 or something like that, then
that's
I would 100% be cool with taking him inside the top 10 because aside from like
great.
minor technical stuff, he is that type of player on film to me. So just a couple other guys. I'm curious on what Josh Downs runs. He is probably a guy that's going to run, if I had to guess, like high 4.4s, but I don't know. I will be concerned a little bit if he runs over 4.5s because I think he's going to weigh in around 170. That's really small. That's one of the bigger differences. I'm going to write an article about this, I think, this week, but between Flowers and Downs, I think Flowers has more of a accelerator, a different gear in terms of explosiveness, deep speed wise. Than Downs does, but maybe I'll be wrong there. I'm curious to see. And then Julius Brents got mocked to the Steelers this week from Kansas State. He had a really good Senior Bowl, checks a ton of boxes. I mean, that the Steelers typically would look for. He's got the size, he's got the length. He plays the run very well. Um,
Fluidity. I think
fluidity for
I
his
think
size is very, very intriguing.
positional
I want to
coverage
see
as
how he
well.
runs. If he goes out and runs like mid 4.4s, something like that, I think we're talking about a guy that's going to shoot himself up into day two, maybe higher into day two than we previously expected. It's kind of difficult to gauge this cornerback class because like it's just freaking loaded, like, and it's
Yeah,
got flavors for whatever you'd like. And then just one more drill. Dang, almost knocked my computer down. One more drill related thing is Dontavion Wicks. Like, I want to see how he catches the football in these drills at the combine. Just a lot of drops on tape. Like, I think he's super talented. That Virginia offense this year was a catastrophe to say the least. But he's a guy who I think is like super talented. Is gonna probably go on day 3 of the draft, I guess. But someone that I could easily outplay their draft position. I want to see how he catches the football. Like, just drops littered all over his tape. It was a really big problem this past season. And then Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for me. You got
Mm.
anybody else?
No, not much, but mention on Wix. So
Mm-hmm.
catching drills, I really look for this a lot. I look for how wide and how close together your hands are. Typically, if you're forming about it like a diamond technique, you're able to slow the rotation of the ball with your fingers. That's something I look for so much. A lot of it has to do with the way I've been look things I've looked for in receiver. Jahan Dotson had one of the best drills last year,
Yep.
just being able to catch the ball. I'm really curious to see who stands out in that regard overall. Who has wider hands than expected and has some clapping issues with their hands because of how wide they are. You know, there's a lot to look forward to at the combine. We can't hit on everything, but we hope that we gave you a really good rundown of just what to look for, guys that could blow up the combine overall.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, and we're looking forward to next week, man. I know I'm gonna be in Indy. A couple of our guys, Noah, Steven, are gonna be in Indianapolis covering the combine in person. Something I got to do last year, which was an awesome experience. Getting to talk to the players, getting to see them work out. Really looking forward to how awesome next week's going to be, and we hope that we can provide a ton of coverage for you guys as well. So be sure to stay tuned to the site. There's going to be plenty of content up next week, interviews of players, all kinds of stuff. And as always, just make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/all Steelers talk. We will be back next week. I'm not sure the time and day because I'll be in Indianapolis traveling. But we will have an episode next week. We're about to start doing our positional rankings. We're going to drop some positional rankings for you guys on the pod. If there's a specific position you guys want to see, relatively early in the process, let us know. Drop a comment, drop a like, and we'll see you guys next week. Peace.
Peace.